At my husband's birthday party, he heartlessly locked me outside in the pouring rain, all because I threw out his mistress, who had the audacity to come to my house and celebrate his birthday. As I stood outside, shivering from the cold, I watched through the window as they laughed, enjoyed the party, and opened gifts together. 1 hour later, a luxurious black car stopped in front of the house. I froze when I saw who stepped out. It was my grandmother from the countryside, a billionaire. When she saw me trembling in the rain, she slowly lifted her gaze toward the house and said only one word: "Destroy it." What happened next made my husband completely hysterical. But before the story begins, don't forget to write in the comments where you're watching from. Like and subscribe so the channel Stories with Purpose can continue to grow and bring you more meaningful stories. The atmosphere inside the grand house was lively and dazzling that night. Crystal chandeliers illuminated the living room, reflecting light across the carefully decorated space. Soft music flowed in the background, blending with laughter and cheerful conversations. Guests filled every corner of the house. It was Victor's birthday, my husband, and I'd spent the entire day making sure everything was perfect. My feet ached terribly after hours of non-stop work, supervising the catering, arranging decorations, and preparing Victor's clothes. But I ignored my exhaustion. I wanted this night to be special for him. I stood quietly in a corner, holding a tray of drinks, watching Victor laugh freely with his business partners. He looked handsome and authoritative, exactly like the successful man everyone admired. Yet something had been bothering me since the party began. Victor never once introduced me as his wife. He let me move back and forth serving guests like a hired waitress. Even when I handed him a drink, he merely nodded without looking at me, as if I were a stranger paid to work there. I swallowed the pain in my chest. He's just busy, I told myself. I kept smiling politely at the guests, even though some of them looked at me with disdain because of my simple appearance. I wasn't wearing an expensive evening gown like the other wives. I wore a modest dress and a neatly arranged shawl, the best I owned. Victor had always strictly controlled my personal spending, counting every dollar. Suddenly, the noise near the entrance softened. Conversations stopped, replaced with whispers of admiration. I turned around. A woman walked in confidently. Her name was Sabrina. She wore a glamorous, sparkling gown that clung to her figure. Her makeup was bold yet luxurious, her hair styled in a modern fashion. She walked as if she were the star of the night. What crushed me was Victor's reaction. The moment she saw Sabrina, his face lit up, far brighter than it had that morning when he saw me. He immediately left his colleagues and walked straight towards her with a wide smile. Without shame, Sabrina linked her arm through Victor's in front of everyone. They looked like the perfect couple. My chest tightened. I gripped the tray so hard my knuckles turned white. As if that weren't enough, Mrs. Veronica, my mother-in-law, emerged from the crowd. The same woman who constantly criticized me suddenly became warm and affectionate towards Sabrina. She embraced her tightly, kissed her cheeks, and proudly took her hand. Mrs. Veronica brought Sabrina to the center of the room, loudly introducing her to important guests while praising her beauty and success, as if she were the ideal daughter-in-law. My world slowly collapsed. I was Victor's legal wife. I was the one who took care of Mrs. Veronica when she was sick. I was the one who ran this household. I was the one who stood by Victor when he had nothing. Yet tonight, in my own house, I was invisible. I approached them with trembling steps. I placed the tray down with a sharp clang that drew attention. I faced Victor and asked, my voice shaking but firm, "What is the meaning of this? Why is this woman here acting like she owns this house?" Victor's face suddenly disappeared. He hissed at me to stop causing a scene. But Sabrina laughed softly, a mocking laugh. She said she was just there to celebrate her beloved and asked why I was so stiff and jealous. That was the breaking point. I pointed to the door and demanded she leave my house immediately. The room fell with silence. Mrs. Veronica rushed forward, scolding me in front of everyone. She called me rude and ungrateful for kicking out an honored guest. She said Sabrina was far more classy and deserving to be there than someone like me who only embarrassed the family. I looked at Victor, hoping, begging for him to defend me. He didn't. Instead, his face twisted with anger, directed at me. He grabbed my wrist painfully and dragged me toward the front door as guests whispered around us. He accused me of ruining his birthday and said I never knew my place. Outside, thunder roared and rain poured down. Victor shoved me out into the storm. "If you can't accept Sabrina," he shouted, "then you have no place in this house. I choose her over you." He slammed the heavy wooden door shut and locked it. I stood there frozen in the rain, shaking, not only from the cold, but from heartbreak. Through the window, I saw them laughing again. Victor and Sabrina cut the birthday cake together, his hand over hers. Mrs. Veronica applauded proudly. They celebrated, while I was standing outside, soaked, shivering, and forgotten. Then headlights appeared. A luxurious black car stopped. My grandmother stepped out. A billionaire. She looked at me, then at the house, and said only one word: destroy it. I wanted to scream. I wanted to shatter the glass so they would finally notice me. But my strength was gone. The cold began to eat away at my consciousness. My lips felt stiff, turning bluish. My vision blurred as rain relentlessly streams down my face. Through the foggy glass, I saw Victor feeding Sabrina the first slice of cake. She accepted it sweetly, then gently wiped a smear of cream from the corner of Victor's lips with her finger. The sight was so painful it made my stomach churn. Memories flooded my mind, back when we lived in a cramped rental apartment on the outskirts of Los Angeles, back when Victor had nothing. He had promised me happiness once he succeeded. I had sold the jewelry my late mother left me to fund his first business. I survived on plain rice and salt so he could afford gas for his old motorcycle while searching for work. All those sacrifices replayed in my head like a broken old film. And this was the reward. When he finally had everything, wealth, status, power, he threw me away for a woman who only appeared once he reached the top. Loyalty, I realized, had no value to Victor. Money and power had blinded his heart. He had forgotten who walked beside him while climbing life's steepest hills. Time crawled mercilessly. I had probably been standing in the rain for over an hour. My body no longer felt cold, only numbness spreading from my feet to my head. My legs gave out. I collapsed onto the rough, icy asphalt of the driveway. Rainwater soaked the hem of my clothes. I shook violently. My teeth chattered uncontrollably. My breathing became shallow and labored. My consciousness faded in and out. In my heart, I prayed if this was the end, I begged God to avenge this pain. I refused to die meaninglessly while they celebrated inside. Just as my eyes were about to close, a bright light suddenly pierced through the curtain of rain. I squinted. A glossy black car slowly entered the driveway. It was no ordinary car. From its massive build to the gleaming emblem on its hood, I knew instantly it belonged to the elite of the elite,
the kind only top-tier billionaires owned. The car stopped right in front of me. Its engine purred so softly it was almost drowned out by the rain. The front door opened. A uniformed driver stepped out swiftly, holding a large black umbrella. He hurried to the rear passenger door and opened it respectfully. My heart beat weakly. Who would arrive this late at night in such luxury? A foot stepped down onto the wet asphalt, low heels, elegant and expensive. Then an elderly woman emerged from the car. She was old, yet commanding. She wore refined attire beneath a thick coat, and in her hand was a walking cane with a handle that gleamed like gold. She stood tall under the umbrella as her sharp eyes scanned the estate, until they landed on me, lying helpless on the ground. Her eyes widened in shock. She rushed towards me, ignoring the rain splashing onto her clothes. As she drew closer, I recognized her face under the porch light, lined with age, yet deeply familiar. It was Grandmother Kumala, my grandmother, the woman I believed lived simply as an old farmer in the countryside. She dropped to her knees beside me, not caring that they were soaked by rainwater. She cupped my ice-cold face with her warm hands. Panic and fury burned in her eyes. "My precious granddaughter," she whispered, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. I could only stare at her weakly. My lips were too stiff to move. Grandmother Kumala immediately removed her thick coat and wrapped it around my body. The warmth eased my violent shivering. The driver and 2 large bodyguards from another car behind us rushed forward, ready to assist. Grandmother raised her hand, commanding silence. Then she turned her gaze toward the large window. From where we stood, she saw everything I had seen. Victor, Sabrina, Mrs. Veronica, laughing happily. Her jaw tightened. The loving gaze she had for me transformed into something terrifying. The stare of a predator who had found her prey. She saw their joy built upon her granddaughter's suffering. Slowly, Grandmother Kumala stood, leaning on her golden cane. She radiated an authority I had never witnessed before. She pointed the cane toward the mansion. Her voice was calm, but absolute. It cut through the sound of the rain. She turned to the head of her security detail and uttered one word that would change everyone's fate inside that house forever. "Destroy it." The command was final. The guards nodded in unison, their faces cold and emotionless. Grandmother looked back at me. Her eyes softened again, promising protection I had never received from my own husband. That single word was like a detonator. 6 bodyguards in tailored black suits moved in perfect synchronization. They didn't run, they marched, firm, rhythmic, intimidating. Their boots thudded heavily against the wet asphalt. They reached the front door. Without knocking, one of them kicked the massive carved wooden door with brutal force. Crash! The sound was deafening, louder than the thunder above. The locked door flew open, its hinges damaged. Cold night air rushed into the warm party, carrying rain and raw fury. Inside, laughter died instantly. Music screeched to an abrupt stop. All eyes turned toward the gaping entrance. Guests froze, glasses still pressed to their lips, faces pale with fear as the imposing men entered. Victor dropped the fork he was holding. It clattered sharply against the marble floor. Sabrina immediately hid behind him. Mrs. Veronica stared wide-eyed, her mouth hanging open. Victor recovered first. his face flushed with anger as he stepped forward, shouting, demanding to know who they were and what right they had to break into his house. He threatened to call the police, convinced they were hired thugs or reckless criminals. The guards ignored him completely. They spread out in formation, creating a human barrier between the guests and the entrance. Victor tried to shove one of them. His body bounced back as if he had hit a concrete wall. Then Grandmother Kumala entered. The rhythmic tapping of her golden cane echoed across the silent marble floor. Behind her, I limped in, supported by her driver. My appearance was a stark contrast to the glamorous party. My clothes soaked, my shawl disheveled, my face pale, lips blue. Water dripped from my garments, leaving wet footprints on the expensive marble. Victor's expression shifted from anger to confusion to ridicule. Mrs. Veronica planted her hands on her hips and let out a mocking laugh. "Well, I thought who dared cause trouble. Turns out it's just Livana's old village grandmother." She insulted Grandmother Kumala, calling her a clueless old beggar, asking sarcastically if she had come all the way to Los Angeles to beg for leftovers from the party. Sabrina laughed softly beside her, confidence returning.
They truly had no idea what was really happening. They were blind to the danger standing right in front of them. Grandmother Kumala stopped at the very center of the room, directly beneath the massive crystal chandelier shimmering overhead. She did not respond to Mrs. Veronica's insults. Her face remained calm, expressionless, but her eyes burned as they shifted slowly from Victor to Sabrina and then to Mrs. Veronica. That gaze was sharp and icy, as if it could freeze the blood of anyone it landed on. She slightly raised her golden cane and struck it hard against the marble floor. Bam! The sound instantly silenced Mrs. Veronica's and Sabrina's laughter. Grandmother Kumala looked straight at Victor and spoke in a calm yet piercing voice. She said she had not come to beg, but to reclaim what traitors had no right to enjoy. Victor frowned, unable to grasp her meaning. He still believed he held absolute power in his own house. With arrogance, he pointed toward the door and ordered all of us to leave. He shouted that I should take his crazy old grandmother out immediately before he called the residential security to drag us away. He sneered that he was disgusted seeing his marble floor dirtied by rainwater from our clothes. At that moment, one of Grandmother Kumala's guards stepped forward ready to teach Victor a lesson, but Grandmother raised her left hand, signaling him to stop. She wanted to handle this her own way. She turned to me, still trembling, and gently released her grip on the cane to straighten my soaked shawl. Her touch was incredibly soft, so different from the deadly glare she had given Victor moments earlier. "Stay calm," she whispered. "Watch how God repays evil tonight." Then she lifted her gaze to Victor and gave a subtle look to her guards. It was the signal. Phase 1 of Destroy It. Without warning, the guards moved, not against people, but against the symbols of luxury filling the room. One guard approached the towering, multi-tiered birthday cake and with a single powerful shove sent it crashing to the floor. Crash! The beautiful cake was destroyed in seconds, cream and sponge scattered across the white marble floor. Victor and Sabrina screamed hysterically. Before they could protest, another guard yanked the buffet tablecloth violently. Plates, glasses, crystal bowls filled with fruit dessert, and heated trays of gourmet food all came crashing down, shattering loudly. Glass shards and food flew everywhere. Female guests screamed and ran backward, terrified of being hit by debris. Chaos erupted. Imported floral arrangements and balloon decorations were torn down. A large framed photo of Victor and Sabrina near the entrance was kicked over, its glass exploding into fragments. In mere seconds, the elegant party hall turned into a wreck.
Victor tried to rush forward to stop a guard who was smashing chairs, but two others blocked him, solid as concrete walls. He could do nothing but shout in rage, his face red with uncontrollable fury. Mrs. Veronica screamed hysterically as she watched her expensive furniture being destroyed. She cursed Grandmother Kumala with filthy words, calling her a barbaric village woman with no manners. Yet Grandmother Kumala remained calm, standing unmoved amid the chaos like a general on the battlefield. She watched the destruction with cold satisfaction. This is only the beginning, I thought. Grandmother Kumala then pulled a slim phone from her coat pocket and typed quickly. Seconds later, the crystal chandelier flickered, then went completely dark. The room was plunged into emergency lighting, illuminated only by flashing lightning from outside. Screams grew louder. Victor's proud birthday party had officially become a nightmare. Panic swept through the room. In the emergency lighting, guests no longer cared about manners or social status. They only wanted to escape what now felt like hell. One by one, they rushed toward the exit, stepping over broken plates and spilled food. No one said goodbye to Victor. No one wished him a happy birthday. Only hurried footsteps and frightened whispers filled the air. They avoided eye contact with Grandmother Kumala and her guards, fear etched on their faces. In less than 10 minutes, the once crowded hall was empty. Only we remained. Me, Grandmother Kumala, her guards, and Victor, Sabrina, and Mrs. Veronica, standing trembling among the ruins of their party. Victor stared at the empty room in disbelief. A celebration he had planned for months to elevate his reputation among Los Angeles business elites was destroyed in an instant. His reputation was ruined. He turned toward Grandmother Kumala with deep hatred, fists clenched, veins bulging in his neck. He marched toward her, ignoring the glass cutting into his shoe soles, and pointed a shaking finger at her face. He shouted that he would sue her for property damage and trespassing. He swore he would throw her in prison and let her rot there until she died. Grandmother Kumala responded with a faint smile, a deeply condescending smile. She walked calmly to the main sofa, the imported Italian leather couch Victor loved to sit on while ordering me around. She sat gracefully, crossed her legs, and placed her golden cane beside her. Her posture made one thing clear. She was in control now. Meanwhile, a medical professional who had arrived with Grandmother's entourage approached me. He satted me on an intact chair, wrapped me in a thick, warm blanket, checked my condition, and handed me hot tea from a thermos. For the first time that night, I felt human again. Grandmother Kumala then looked at Victor, who was still breathing heavily. She casually took a thick navy blue folder from her assistant's leather bag and threw it on the table in front of him. Thud. She told him to read it before talking nonsense about lawsuits and prison. Victor hesitated, glanced at Mrs. Veronica and Sabrina, then opened the folder with trembling hands. As he read page after page, his expression shifted from confusion to pure terror. His face turned pale as paper, cold sweat streamed down his temples, his hands shook so violently the documents crinkled loudly. Sabrina peeked over his shoulder and gasped, covering her mouth. Mrs. Veronica snatched the papers and read them herself. Her knees gave out instantly. She collapsed onto the floor. The documents were the original ownership certificates of the mansion and acknowledgments of corporate debt totaling billions of US dollars. They clearly stated that the legal owner of the house was not Victor, but a holding company named Kumala Holdings. And the sole owner of Kumala Holdings was Grandmother Kumala, the village beggar they had just mocked. Victor had only held a conditional usage right, mortgaged to the company. Due to defaulted payments and severe contract violations, fully documented by Grandmother's legal team, all of Victor's assets, including this house, had been officially seized as of tonight. Grandmother Kumala spoke, her voice echoing through the silent room.
She revealed that she had been Victor's secret investor, channeling funds through trusted intermediaries so he could succeed and make her granddaughter happy. She had done everything quietly so Victor wouldn't feel inferior. And how did he repay her? By cheating, humiliating her granddaughter, and throwing her into the rain like a stray dog. She said wealth could be given in an instant and taken back even faster. Victor dropped the folder. He stared at her in disbelief, shaking his head repeatedly, mumbling that this was impossible. How could an old woman who used to bring rice and vegetables be the owner of a real estate empire dominating the market? His arrogance shattered. He realized too late he had awakened a sleeping dragon. Mrs. Veronica crawled toward grandmother's feet, crying and begging for mercy. Guards pushed her away. She claimed it was all a misunderstanding and frantically praised grandmother as kind and generous. It was disgusting. Moments ago she had humiliated us. Now she begged like a servant. Sabrina, realizing the situation had completely reversed, slowly backed away toward the rear exit.
She wanted no part in this downfall. Sabrina slowly tried to step back, intending to slip away before the situation consumed her, but Grandmother Kumala's sharp eyes caught the movement instantly. She slammed her golden cane against the floor and shouted for Sabrina to stop where she was. Grandmother Kumala declared that no one was allowed to leave this room until she was finished speaking. Sabrina froze mid-step, her face drained of color, terror clearly written across it. Grandmother Kumala swept her gaze over the three of them, Victor, Mrs. Veronica, and Sabrina, with undisguised disgust. She said she did not need their fake apologies. What she demanded was justice for her granddaughter. She rose from the sofa, reclaiming her golden cane, and walked toward Victor, who still stood there in stunned silence. From this very second, she announced, this house was seized. Every luxury item inside it, every car in the garage, and every facility they had enjoyed, all of it now belonged to Kumala Group, the Western holding company under her control. Her ultimatum was brief and merciless. They had to leave immediately. They were not allowed to bring anything except the clothes on their backs. No jewelry, no cash siphoned from the company, no vehicles. Victor tried to protest. He shouted that this was unfair, that this was his house. He had built it with his own hands. Grandmother Kumala cut him off sharply. She said he had built it with her money, therefore it was hers. She glanced at the gold watch on her wrist. They had exactly 10 minutes. If they were not beyond the front gate within 10 minutes, she would order her guards to assist them, the same rude way Victor had thrown Livana out earlier. The threat was very real and terrifying. Victor turned to me, desperation blazing in his eyes. He looked at me as if he were his last lifeline. He hoped that I, his wife, the woman who had always been patient and forgiving, would step in and save him. He called my name softly. "Livana, please, help me. We're husband and wife." His voice sounded pitiful, but I remained silent, staring at him with empty eyes. My heart had died for him the moment he slammed the door in my face under the pouring rain earlier that night. I turned my head away and let Grandmother Kumala finish what needed to be done. There was no mercy left for a man without a heart. The 10 minutes Grandmother Kumala gave them slipped away like sand through open fingers. The ruined living room turned into a stage of desperate panic. Victor, having just lost his pride, ran frantically toward the master bedroom. He intended to grab anything valuable he could, his luxury watch collection, cash from the safe, or even the land certificate inherited from his father. But his steps stopped abruptly at the bedroom door. 2 massive guards were already standing there, arms crossed, blocking the entrance. Their intimidating stares drained the courage from Victor's body. Victor immediately tried to negotiate. He begged them to let him in just for a moment, to retrieve his wallet and phone. He claimed he couldn't survive without identification or communication. The guards didn't budge. In a deep, flat voice, one of them said that Grandmother Kumala's orders were absolute and non-negotiable. Everything inside the house, including the wallet and phone purchased with corporate funds, was now seized corporate property. Victor screamed in frustration, clutching his hair. He turned toward the table where the keys to his luxury car lay. At the very least, he thought, he could take the car. But another guard's strong hand snatched the keys before Victor could reach them. Bogard slipped them into his suit pocket and calmly stated that the car was registered under the company's name. Victor had no right to take it. Victor was completely cornered. He finally understood that Grandmother Kumala was not bluffing. She intended to strip him of everything until he was returned to zero, the same point where he had started before marrying Livana. Meanwhile, Mrs. Veronica resorted to something far more humiliating. The middle-aged woman who once prided herself on elegance now collapsed to her knees beside Livana, wailing uncontrollably. She tried to grab my hands, begging for mercy, her makeup smeared with tears. She repeatedly used the word family. She reminded me of the good old days, days that had never truly existed, because she had always looked down on me. She called me her favorite daughter-in-law, the most patient and virtuous one. She begged me to persuade Grandmother Kumala to cancel the eviction. She claimed she was old and sickly and would never survive on the streets without a roof over her head. I looked at my mother-in-law with a blank, emotionless stare. The soft heart I once had was now frozen solid. I remembered every cruel insult she had thrown at me earlier, every moment she enthusiastically supported Victor's affair with Sabrina simply because Sabrina appeared wealthier. I slowly pulled my hand away from her grasp and spoke calmly, but my words pierced straight into her chest. I told her I remembered everything this family had done to me. I reminded her that just 10 minutes ago, she herself had ordered the security guards to drag me out into the storm outside the gate. I said real family would never let their child freeze outside the gate to defend a stranger. My words slapped reality into Mrs. Veronica's face. She fell silent, unable to deny the truth. Sabrina, on the other hand, tried to be more cunning. Quietly, she slipped toward the side door, clutching her handbag tightly. Inside it, she had hidden several pieces of jewelry she had stolen from Mrs. Veronica's vanity earlier during the party. But nothing escaped Grandmother Kumala's hawk-like eyes. She nodded her chin slightly toward the head guard. In an instant, he chased Sabrina down and stopped her right at the doorway. He forcefully demanded her handbag. Sabrina struggled, screaming that it was her personal property and that they had no right to touch it. After a brief struggle, the bag was ripped from her hands. The guard turned it upside down. Rings, necklaces, and gold bracelets spilled onto the floor. Mrs. Veronica's jewelry secretly stolen by Sabrina. Mrs. Veronica stared in shock. She never imagined the woman she praised so highly was nothing but a thief. The 10 minutes were up. Grandmother Kumala struck her cane against the floor once more. That was the end of tolerance. The guards moved in unison, firm, efficient, and without unnecessary violence. They escorted Victor, Mrs. Veronica, and Sabrina toward the main entrance. Victor tried to cling to the doorframe, screaming Livana's name one last time, but the strength of the guards was far greater. He was shoved out across the threshold. Mrs. Veronica followed, still screaming hysterically. Then Sabrina, cursing loudly. All three were thrown onto the wet front terrace. The rain was still pouring heavily, almost as if the universe itself had agreed to wash them away. The massive teak door slammed shut behind them. Bang! The sound was identical to the one Victor had made when he shut the door in my face earlier. But now, the roles were reversed. Victor, Mrs. Veronica, and Sabrina were outside, and I was inside the warmth of the house that had always been mine. From behind the door, the sound of the lock turning twice echoed clearly, sealing their fate. Victor pounded the door with his fists, screaming in frustration, but his voice was swallowed by thunder.
Inside, I sat quietly on the sofa. Tears streamed slowly down my cheeks, not tears of loss, but tears of relief. The crushing burden I had carried for so long had finally been lifted. Grandmother Kumala placed a comforting arm around my shoulders and told me that starting tonight, my life would change completely and no one would ever hurt me again. The household staff, who had stayed silent out of fear of Victor and Mrs. Veronica, finally emerged. They looked at Grandmother Kumala with deep respect. She instructed them to clean the house immediately and remove every trace of the party. She ordered that all remaining belongings of Victor, Mrs. Veronica, and Sabrina be gathered and either burned or donated. She wanted no trace of them left. I listened calmly. I knew this was the first step in cleansing my life of past poison. I looked out the window, watching the silhouettes of 3 figures outside struggling with their own fate. There was no pity left in my heart, only justice finally served. The rain mercilessly drenched Victor, Sabrina, and Mrs. Veronica. Within seconds, their expensive party clothes were soaked and clung uncomfortably to their skin. The cold pierced straight to their bones, exactly the same cold I had felt an hour earlier. They stood trembling before the tall, imposing front gate, now tightly shut against them. The garden lights were turned off, leaving them swallowed by the darkness of the night, lit only by occasional lightning. The street in front of the mansion was empty. All of Victor's so-called friends had long disappeared. Not a single one of them stayed behind or offered help. They had vanished the moment they sensed his downfall, proving that their friendship had been built solely on money and status. Victor wiped his rain-soaked face roughly and stared blankly at the mansion that had just been taken from him. His mind was in chaos. Just hours ago, he was a successful young executive in Los Angeles, owner of a luxury home surrounded by beautiful women. Now, he was nothing more than a homeless man with not a single dollar in his pocket. He searched his pants in desperation, hoping for a miracle. Nothing. No wallet, no phone, no car keys.
He truly had nothing left. Regret finally crept into Victor's heart, but not regret for hurting Lavana. What he regretted was his own stupidity for never checking Grandmother Kumala's background from the very beginning. Beside him, Mrs. Veronica was shivering violently. Her teeth chattered uncontrollably as she hugged her own body, wrapped only in a thin, elegant lace dress that offered no protection from the cold. The expensive fabric was now splattered with mud, ruined beyond repair. Mrs. Veronica began whining and blaming Victor for everything that had happened. She weakly struck his arm, demanding to know how he could be so foolish, how he could not realize that Lavana's grandmother was the owner of a massive corporation. She accused him of being incompetent, of failing to manage assets properly until everything was seized overnight. She sobbed about her fate, being forced to stand in the rain at her age when she should have been sleeping comfortably in a soft bed. Her endless complaints made Victor's head throb. His bottled-up rage finally exploded. He shouted at his mother to shut up. The sound of Victor yelling stunned Mrs. Veronica into silence. She stared at him in shock, never expecting her precious son to raise his voice at her. A short distance away, Sabrina watched Victor with undisguised disgust. Her makeup had melted in the rain, turning her once beautiful face into something grotesque, like a crying clown. Her long evening gown dragged through muddy asphalt, making her look ridiculous. Sabrina wasn't crying. Her eyes burned with fury. She felt utterly deceived. She had stayed close to Victor because she believed he was a wealthy man who could secure her future. She had willingly destroyed another woman's marriage for money. But it turned out Victor was nothing more than a poor man, living off the generosity of his wife's grandmother. She felt her time had been wasted on a man with no future. The argument erupted instantly. Sabrina began hurling vicious insults at Victor, calling him a liar, a useless man, a complete loser. She screamed in the rain that she regretted ever knowing him, blaming him for dragging her into this disaster and humiliating her in front of so many people. Victor snapped back, refusing to accept the insults. He threw the blame right back at her, accusing her of stealing his mother's jewelry. He called her a gold digger with no heart. Their shouting grew louder, uglier, each exposing the other's secrets and sins. Meanwhile, Mrs. Veronica could only sit on the curb, crying helplessly. Suddenly, a taxi passed slowly along the road in front of the gated community. It must have just dropped off a passenger nearby. Sabrina's eyes lit up with hope. Without sparing Victor or Mrs. Veronica another glance, she ran into the street, frantically waving her arms to stop the taxi. The car pulled over. Sabrina rushed to open the back door. Seeing this, Victor tried to follow. He thought they could at least leave together, go to a hotel or a friend's place temporarily. He grabbed the taxi door, hoping Sabrina would let him in. But Sabrina slapped his hand away. She stared at him coldly, her eyes filled with contempt. She said she had no intention of sharing a car with a homeless man. Whatever they had was over. She made it clear she had no desire to suffer alongside a poor man and his demanding mother. Unbeknownst to the guards earlier, Sabrina had hidden a spare credit card and some cash, several hundred US dollars, in a secret pocket sewn into her dress. It was enough to save herself. Without the slightest trace of guilt, she climbed into the taxi and slammed the door shut right in front of Victor's face. Victor stood frozen as the taxi drove away into the rain, carrying Sabrina out of their lives. The car grew smaller and smaller until it disappeared around the corner. Victor was discarded like worthless trash. Instant karma struck him brutally. He had abandoned a sincere wife for a woman he thought loved him, only to be abandoned the moment he lost his money. Victor turned to his mother, who was still sitting on the wet sidewalk. Now it was just the two of them. No money, no home, no car, no destination. The cold grew sharper. Mrs. Veronica began coughing violently. Her face turned pale, her lips bluish from the cold. Victor realized he couldn't stay there any longer, or his mother might freeze to death. He had to find shelter. At least a store awning, a vacant security post, anything. With unsteady steps, Victor helped his mother to her feet. They stumbled along the deserted sidewalk, moving farther and farther from the mansion they once boasted about. Every step felt unbearably heavy. Levana's calm expression as they were expelled haunted Victor's mind. He realized he had thrown away a diamond for a handful of gravel, and now even the gravel was gone, leaving his hands empty and bleeding. That night became the longest night of Victor's life, the night he learned the true meaning of loss. The harsh morning sun forced Victor to open his eyes. He woke up not on a soft bed with silk sheets, but on a hard concrete bench in a city park in Los Angeles. His body felt broken. Every joint screamed in pain from sleeping in an unnatural position. He blinked repeatedly, hoping everything that happened was just a nightmare brought about by stress. But the stench of his damp, dirty clothes shattered that illusion. He turned his head to his side and saw his mother. Mrs. Veronica was still asleep, curled up against the cold, using her now empty handbag as a pillow. Her face looked older, exhausted. Her makeup had completely smeared, leaving dark stains around her eyes. The sight struck Victor deeply. They had truly become homeless in a single night. He gently woke his mother. Mrs. Veronica jolted awake, then burst into tears again as reality sunk in. Victor tried to calm her, promising that he would fix everything today. He convinced himself this was all just a misunderstanding or illegal intimidation by grandmother Kumala. He still believed he held authority as a company director. At the very least, he thought, he could go to the office, collect his final paycheck or bonus, and rent a hotel room for them temporarily. With the last remnants of his pride, Victor led his mother on foot towards the corporate office building where he used to work. The distance was far. They walked under the blazing sun with empty stomachs twisting painfully. People on the street stared at them with strange looks. Their appearance was absurd, wrinkled, filthy party clothes, stumbling like drunks in daylight. When they reached the grand office lobby, Victor lifted his chin and tried to walk in with authority. He was immediately stopped by two security guards. These were the same security who used to bow respectfully every morning, opening doors and greeting him politely. Today, their expressions were cold and firm. One guard extended his arm, blocking Victor from entering. Victor exploded in anger, shouting if they didn't recognize their own superior. He threatened to fire them on the spot. The guard replied calmly, without fear. He informed Victor that a termination order had been issued early that morning directly from corporate headquarters. Victor wasn't just fired, he was blacklisted. His photo had already been posted at the security desk with bold red letters, "Banned from entry." Victor stood frozen. Demanding proof, he was shown a copy of the internal memo displayed at reception. It clearly stated that Victor had been dismissed dishonorably for severe ethical violations and abuse of authority that caused significant losses to the company. At the bottom of the document was the signature of the chairman, who also happened to be grandmother Kumala's legal representative. Victor's world spun. He had been humiliated in the worst possible way. His access to the office, documents, and even his private safe had been completely revoked. When he begged to retrieve personal items, the guards refused. All items in his office were now under legal audit as evidence of asset misuse. Victor was forcibly escorted out of the lobby and shoved back onto the scorching sidewalk. Former subordinates stared at him with mocking eyes. Whispers spread everywhere. News of his disgrace had already gone viral in the company's internal message groups. Victor felt naked, every shame exposed. Desperate, Victor rushed to the nearest bank. He remembered a personal savings account, his last hope. Leaving his mother waiting outside, he ran in and approached customer service, claiming he had lost his wallet and card. The clerk asked him to wait for biometric verification. Moments later, her expression changed. She informed Victor that all accounts under his name had been frozen by court order at the request of creditors, namely Kumala Group, in relation to a civil lawsuit for embezzlement. Not a single dollar could be withdrawn. Victor walked out of the bank, legs barely holding him up. His final hope was gone. He returned to where his mother sat waiting. Mrs. Veronica looked at him hopefully, asking if he had money for food and water. Victor could only shake his head weakly. Her sobbing erupted again, louder this time, fueled by hunger. Victor reached into a small, hidden pocket inside his suit jacket. He remembered stashing several $100s there for emergencies. His last chance. But his fingers touched nothing but empty fabric. The money was gone. Victor's mind raced back to the chaos of the previous night. The only person who had hugged him tightly and rummaged in his jacket during the confusion was Sabrina.
When Sabrina pretended to be frightened and hid behind his back, Victor knew exactly what her hands were doing, slithering around, searching for anything she could steal. Victor cursed loudly, spitting Sabrina's name with hatred. That woman was a beautiful devil. She hadn't just abandoned him, she had taken the last remaining cash that could have saved their lives. Victor and Mrs. Veronica had fallen to absolute zero, worse than zero. No money, no home, no job, and empty stomachs. That afternoon, after selling his expensive suit for a humiliatingly low price at a flea market just to get some cash, Victor finally found shelter. Not a hotel, not an apartment, but a cramped, rented room in a filthy, muddy alley that reeked of rot. The room was barely big enough for a single deflated foam mattress. The roof was made of tin, turning the space into an oven during the day. The walls were damp, stained with mold. Mrs. Veronica refused to step inside at first. She was disgusted by the filthy floor and the cockroaches crawling along the walls. But Victor had no choice. The money from selling his suit was only enough to cover 1 week's rent and a few takeaway meals. That night, they ate boxed rice in silence. The air was filled with the sounds of neighbors screaming at each other and mosquitoes buzzing hungrily in the dark. Their fall was complete.
While Victor and Mrs. Veronica struggled to survive in that narrow alley, life on the other side of Los Angeles changed dramatically for Lavana. She now lived at Mensa Estate, the grand mansion owned by grandmother Kumala, a magnificent palace surrounded by vast, lush gardens. The atmosphere was calm and serene, far removed from the chaos and emotional suffocation she had endured for years. Lavana no longer had to wake before dawn to serve an ungrateful husband or endure the cruel insults of a heartless mother-in-law. Here, she was treated like royalty. The servants attended to her with respect, anticipating her needs before she even spoke. Yet grandmother Kumala did not allow her granddaughter to drown in luxury. She had a bigger plan. Grandmother Kumala trained Lavana rigorously, but with unwavering love. She told her that tears would never change destiny. Only strength and power could protect someone from being trampled by others. Lavana was taught the inner workings of Kumala Holdings, asset management, investment strategies, and how to dominate a negotiation table. At first, Lavana doubted herself. She believed she was nothing more than an ordinary housewife with no real skills. But her grandmother never stopped encouraging her, reminding her that the blood of a business empire ran through her veins. Lavana studied relentlessly. She absorbed every lesson, determined to prove that she was not a disposable woman. Her transformation followed, inside and out. She no longer wore oversized, worn-out dresses. Now she dressed in elegant, modern business attire designed by top fashion houses. Her shawl was styled neatly, her makeup natural yet refined, revealing the beauty that had long been buried beneath years of suffering. When Lavana first stepped into the headquarters of Kumala Holdings as its new CEO, every eye turned toward her. Employees lowered their heads, not out of fear, but out of respect for the authority radiating from her presence. She led meetings decisively, making sharp, strategic decisions that left shareholders impressed and speechless. Lavana had been reborn. The news of Lavana's appointment as the sole heir and new leader of Kumala Holdings spread rapidly across the media. Her face graced business magazines and television screens. Victor saw it by accident. He was sitting at a roadside coffee stall, exhausted after a long day of manual labor as a market porter, waiting for the rain to stop. His eyes froze on the old television hanging in the corner. There she was, Lavana, radiant, confident, articulate. Victor barely recognized the woman on the screen as the obedient wife who once lowered her gaze before him. His heart trembled violently. The regret he had buried for so long finally exploded. He realized how foolish he had been. He had thrown away a diamond for a worthless stone. Maybe, he thought desperately, there was still a chance. Maybe Lavana still loved him. Maybe he could beg for forgiveness and return to a life of luxury as her husband. That desperate, selfish hope drove Victor to do something reckless. The next day, using his last few dollars for bus fare, Victor went to the towering skyscraper of Kumala Holdings in downtown Los Angeles. He looked miserable. His clothes were torn and dirty, his face dull and unshaven. His thin body reeked of sweat. He looked like a homeless man among sharp-suited executives. Victor approached the marble reception desk and demanded to see Mrs. Lavana, claiming to be her husband. The receptionist scanned him from head to toe with undisguised disgust before calling security, reporting a mentally disturbed man impersonating the CEO's husband. Chaos erupted. 3 security guards dragged Victor out of the building as he screamed Lavana's name at the top of his lungs. He was thrown onto the scorching sidewalk as passersby stared at him with contempt. Just as Victor struggled to stand, a sleek black luxury sedan pulled up. The door opened. Lavana stepped out. She was breathtaking. Victor rushed forward, screaming her name. "Lavana, it's me, Victor, your husband!" Security stopped him instantly. Lavana turned. Their eyes met. Victor searched her gaze for love, for pity, for recognition, but there was nothing. No anger, no sorrow, only absolute indifference. Levana turned away and walked back into the building. The glass doors closed, their worlds separated forever. That night, back in the suffocating rented room, Mrs. Veronica lay coughing violently on the thin mattress, her once proud figure reduced to fragile bones. Victor sat near the door, counting coins in his calloused hands. The money wasn't even enough for proper food, let alone medicine. Regret crushed him completely. And then the alley fell silent. A sound unfamiliar to the slum echoed softly. An engine. Victor peeked outside. A luxury black sedan had stopped at the entrance of the alley. Whispers among neighbors grew in awe. The rear door opened. A man stepped out. And then Levana emerged, elegant, powerful, untouchable, standing like a queen in a place that no longer belonged to her past.